Now, before the title gets me in trouble, I'm not meaning to say that Minecraft is some sort of magical HRT. For the last 10 years, my life has been based off of Minecraft and soy sauce, and there's still less estrogen in my body than a Warhammer store. No. What I want to talk about today is my personal journey growing up alongside the game, and how it helped me become the person I am today. Minecraft released in 2011, when I was only 6 years old, and I started playing it in 2013 at 8. Over a whole decade ago. At the time, Update 1.5 had just released, but as I was playing on the Xbox 360, it took a while for those features to reach me. We didn't even have carpets yet, and you can see how wild I went once stained glass was added. This world symbolises to me the formative years of my childhood. Each block and build can be traced back to a memory or an old friend, back to a time when I was unaware of politics or sexuality or gender identity, least of all my own. I grouped those things together for a reason: politics and gender identity. Inherently, they hold no link. However, in the UK and many other countries, they have been recently forced together into a horrifying chimera known as the trans debate. This is a government and media-driven spotlight on the transgender and gender non-conforming community that I shall be referring to as a dead cat. The dead cat strategy comes from the idea that if you wish to distract someone, in this case the wider population, you should use a shocking statement or a scapegoat. Ironically, this was first published in The Telegraph by none other than former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, around the time that I was first playing Minecraft. Johnson wrote, "There is one thing that is absolutely certain about throwing a dead cat on the dining room table. They will be talking about the dead cat, the thing you want them to talk about. They will not be talking about the issue that has been causing you so much grief." The definition of a dead cat is important, because as a trans person in the UK, my very existence has been continuously used by Johnson's contemporaries in exactly the way he described all those years ago. Luckily, as all this was going on, I was blissfully unaware. We will now fast forward to 2016, the last days of this first world. I was now in secondary school, and as many of us remember, Minecraft's popularity took a nosedive around this period, and nobody was quicker to announce it than British Year 7s. The most telling part of this was the choice of words used to describe their distaste for the game. I distinctly remember one of my friends I built my first world with claiming that he would never play a gay game like Minecraft, and any mention of the game at school would be met with a slew of homophobic remarks. This reflects more on the attitudes of British youth at the time than on Minecraft itself. There is nothing inherently queer about breaking and placing blocks, but what I believe fueled this notion was largely the passive and creative nature of the game, which was not seen as manly by insecure 12-year-old boys. Growing up in this environment leads to a lot of internalised homophobia, misogyny, and toxic masculinity. All of these things hit innocent, sheltered, and naive young me like a bus, and I rapidly spiralled towards the incel pipeline. Due to having hobbies like horse riding growing up, I'd always been surrounded by primarily female friendship groups, and secondary school was my first time being part of an all-male group. Due to this toxic environment, I completely suppressed any notion that I might not be heterosexual, and gender identity was something beyond any consideration. I lashed out at those around me who were confident enough to deviate from the heteronormative hypermasculinity I was surrounded by, and this is the most shameful period of my life by far. Yet throughout it all, I still clung on to Minecraft, playing it in secret every night, usually alone. Until 2021, I lived in a borough of southeast London. It was not the worst place by far, however my anxiety reached an almost agoraphobic level where outside of school I would not leave my house. Throughout this period, I fell into a constant state of what I now recognise as depression, and did make several attempts on my own life. Minecraft is what got me through those times, creating my own worlds and stories I could explore to feel alive, which is part of why it's still important to me to this day. In early 2020, when I was halfway through Year 10, COVID happened, and the country went into lockdown. This removed school from my life, which was both a blessing and a curse. Now I was spared from the toxic peer pressure and bullying I experienced there. However, like everyone else in the world, I now had no social life at all. By some miracle, during this time, Minecraft experienced an explosion in popularity, and I began connecting with people from my school online, who I would never have approached in person.
Together, we started Minecraft servers that I still keep in my backups folders to this day, such as my Venice-inspired city. It was over this time that I really began to develop my skills as a builder, and grew closer to the mixed-gendered groups of friends. Along with the mix of genders was also a mix of sexualities, and I became close with people who I would have once harassed due to my own insecurity.
It was during this time that I began my first relationship, and I still firmly believe that it was her openness about sexuality that allowed me to examine my own for the first time in my life. As soon as I realised I was bi, it was like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Years of suppressing what I believed to be intrusive thoughts gave way like a dam breaking, and the relief that washed over me cannot be understated. However, the guilt of how my previous self had acted still remained, and I started doing everything I could to atone for that, which was not helped by the collapse of that relationship and the dissolvement of that friendship group, which led to a slew of targeted cyberbullying that lasted almost a year and a half, mainly taking place on Minecraft itself, due to poor server security on my part. The game that had once been my refuge was transformed into a battlefield, where I would have a panic attack every time an unfamiliar username joined one of my worlds. However, this did teach me a lot about mental health and a great deal of empathy.
Then I moved house to the rural southeast in 2021, and although lockdown had been lifted, I was still just as isolated. I began streaming and creating content on Minecraft to pass the time, making many online friends I'm still in contact with to this day. My sexuality was now comfortable, and the ghosts of toxic masculinity were beginning to fade. This was around the time of the Dream SMP, and despite the questionable individuals it contained, it had a very large LGBT audience. Becoming part of this fandom led to me interacting with lots of people with different gender identities, sexualities and backgrounds, which hugely opened my mind and got me interested in politics. Politics which we shall be visiting shortly. But we've still got 3 years to catch up on. Sixth form, and my career as a semi-professional Minecraft builder, took off in late 2021. For the first time in years, I had a friendship group free of the misogyny and toxic masculinity that had stifled my self-discovery in secondary. Furthermore, my departure from London evaporated a lot of the social anxiety I'd been struggling with. It is well known that your average London teenager looks like this, standing outside a Greggs with a shank, and the alternative fashion scene was hardly respected there. In my new environment, I began experimenting with gothic fashion and self-expression, which led to the realisation that I wanted to dress in a feminine way, but was too shy at this point to do so. I practiced eyeliner for hours a day and began to consider that I was gender fluid. During this time, I started one of my biggest projects with some sixth form friends, a medieval survival server that rapidly spiraled out of control as my Minecraft addiction resurfaced. This led to the creation of King's Coast, free on Planet Minecraft by the way, which to this day is one of my proudest achievements, and I will forever hold close the memories of the friends I built it with.
After a while, I realised that gender fluid didn't quite fit me. I would rarely have days where I felt masculine, often drifting between gender neutral and feminine. Labels are a complicated thing, trying to take a unique personal experience and categorise them in a non-emphatic way. This is why people may spend years testing out different labels in an expressive trial and error, but like trying to drop a circle through a square hole, it rarely encompasses everything that they feel. After about a year or so, I thought that non-binary would suit me best, and changed my name to MJ, because it was related enough to my dead name for people to accept, and didn't feel purely masculine. Feelings are fluid, and constantly in flux, like shaking a water balloon, and words are solid, rigid, and pointy. They can never fully encompass a unique individual human being entirely. This is why gender lists often fail so spectacularly. But that's yet another dead cat that we'll get to later. Right now we're still talking about me.
In year 13, I wrote a psychology dissertation about the science behind being transgender, and the political injustices that trans people face in the UK. A lot of the information I'll be citing in this video comes directly from my research on that project. During writing this dissertation, I became aware of how passionate I felt about trans rights, especially the camaraderie I felt with trans women and my anger towards the British government. Eventually, this led to the point where I wore a dress to my sixth form prom, my first public appearance as a trans woman. Around this time is when I met Lich, a Minecraft events YouTuber who I've done numerous projects with. This dragged me back into the YouTube space and rekindled my affiliation for content creation, particularly around Minecraft. I began making Minecraft build videos again, to start with being present only in voiceover. However, as I became more in touch with the fact that I am, and always have been, a woman, I was able to express myself in ways that gave me enough confidence to start appearing in front of a green screen. I began dressing in skirts and dresses in public, cutting my hair in more feminine ways, and using makeup to pass as female. This gave me so much confidence in myself and my appearance, leading to the realization that my insecurities were in fact rooted in gender dysphoria, and now that I was remedying it, I could be myself online and in my content. Although my voice still needs a lot of work.
So this is where we stand currently. I have socially transitioned to be a woman, use she/they pronouns, and identify as a woman. But this is where the government and the reign of dead cats come into play. Earlier, I used the trans debate and the gender lists of examples of distractions used by the government and the media which I deemed to be dead cats. In the UK, our main news outlet is the BBC, which, unlike in America, is not privately owned. Instead, it is funded by taxes in the form of a mandatory TV licence. This has been the case for decades, and disinformation has been their bread and butter for a long time. Hilariously exemplified by the fake vans used in the 60s to detect if you'd actually paid your licence or not. But anyway, being publicly funded means that they are in some ways overseen by the government, who have control of all public institutions. What could go wrong?
For the past 5 years or so, the BBC has been fixated on what they call the trans debate, which is at its core a dehumanising implication that trans people do not have the right to exist. There is no debate about it. Trans people exist and have done for a very long time, although throughout history we have been labelled as many horrific things, such as the original DSM definition of autogenitophilia, implying that being transgender was nothing more than a perversion or a fetish. And the apple of the BBC does not fall far from the transphobia tree. So how common is being transgender? And does the BBC have any right to debate its existence and validity? Well, to start with, we have to say that measuring statistics of these sort are incredibly difficult, and transgender prevalence data is usually a large underestimation or contains significant biases. Many of these tie in with the government's own actions and how people are recognised as being transgender. Social transitioning is not recognised legally in the UK, or many parts of the world, although in some countries like Spain, self-determination laws have been passed. This means that the only way for someone to show up as transgender in a mass survey technique, such as the census, is if they have legally or medically transitioned. Which leads to our next issue.
In order to legally change gender in the UK, you must go through a clusterfuck of bureaucratic nonsense in order to obtain a gender recognition certificate. Philosphytube did an amazing video on this, and her personal experience speaks far louder than my amateur research. Her video will be linked down below if you're interested. The GRC is important because without it you'll be treated as your cisgender on all official forms, including your death certificate. This means that if you want to be buried as yourself, you have to jump through all the government hoops to make sure they put the right name on your gravestone. The other issue with the GRC is that applicants must be over 18. This means that we can't use GRC applications as a measure of the number of trans people in the UK because it discounts all trans youth.
Secondly, the applicant must prove that they have been living as their gender for at least 2 years, aka socially transitioned. Therefore, I would not be eligible for another year and a half to even begin this process. Furthermore, if someone was raised in a toxic or transphobic environment, they may have been forced to be closeted despite knowing they were transgender. This requirement also reinforces the stereotypical masculine and feminine values, as there is no true way to quantify living as the opposite gender without applying it to the societal framework of gender norms. But if you want to go to the right hospital ward or prison, you must put up with these toxic stereotypes for at least 2 years apparently. Trans men do not owe anyone masculinity. Trans women do not owe anyone femininity. They deserve to be able to live as themselves without society deeming that they are not manly enough to be a man or womanly enough to be a woman. Next we have an utterly idiotic part of the process, which is a panel of strangers whose goal is to decide if you are really trans. This is in direct conflict with the very personal nature of gender identity, and once again reinforces the stereotypical notions of masculinity and femininity. This gender recognition panel is in place to peer review each case and prevent bias. However, it results in an outside observer attempting to review a person's internal gender experience, once again trying to put something fluid into a solid category. The final part of this process is perhaps the most problematic and contains a wonderful bureaucratic catch-22. Let me explain. Applicants are required to have a gender dysphoria diagnosis, as laid out in the DSM-5. This opens up a whole other can of worms about whether or not being transgender is a mental disorder, rather than a part of the human experience, and leads to an overly clinical, reductionist approach which fuels the transphobic notion that all people transitioning are mentally ill. But this isn't even the worst part. It is possible to obtain a GRC without being diagnosed. However, the requirements are significantly more strict. Firstly, you must comply with the stereotypical gender norms of your identified gender for 6 years, rather than 2, and you must have some form of gender-affirming care. This is the catch-22 of the GRC. You cannot get gender-affirming care in the NHS without a gender dysphoria diagnosis. But you can't be undiagnosed without gender-affirming care to get a GRC. Therefore, your only options are to either become rich and go private. Transaxle reported that the average cost of gender-affirming care in the UK was $5,573 in 2022. Jesus Christ, I haven't proofread that. But no, that is the correct statistic, but Christ. Or attempt to go through your local GP to gain an outdated psychological condition. Although once again, Philosphytube describes this far better than I ever could. And another thing about the Philosphytube video, she does the whole thing dressed up in World War II pilot's gear, purely for the bit of it being a catch-22, because that phrase comes from a book about World War II pilots, and I just adore that little bit.
How does this link back to the number of trans people in the UK? Well, we've established that both legally and medically transitioning is inaccessible to the vast majority of people in the UK. This means that we can't use GRC applications, population censuses, or gender identity clinic records as our metric.
That leaves us with direct surveys, which is exactly what Conran et al. Did in 2012. By having 28,176 adults complete a telephone health survey, they found that 0.5% of their sample considered themselves to be transgender. However, despite being supported by similar research, such as Kuiper and Wilson 2014 and Van Caneghem et al. 2015, this is still an outdated and small sample that does not include participants under 18. However, extrapolating this data outwards to the almost 68 million people in the UK, it can be estimated that there are 340,000 trans people in the UK alone. That is hundreds of thousands of people that the BBC is willing to debate existing. The main argument pushed by the media and the current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is that loosening the legal requirements to transition would lead to an abuse of power by cis men to infiltrate women-only spaces for perverse reasons. However, much like autogenitophilia in the 80s, it is mainly a scare tactic used to distract public attention, the dead cat thrown on the dinner table. This is perpetuated by both the BBC's and PM's remarks that trans women are not real women. For example, on a Radio 4, during a debate about chess, and if trans women should take part in women's chess, why that sport is segregated is beyond me, Justin Webb made the remark that trans women are male. He was chastised for this by higher-ups at the BBC for breaking impartiality. However, it echoes comments made in previous years by Sunak in regards to the 2010 Equality Act, which currently protects being transgender against hate crime. As reported by Sky News, Mr. Sunak said he wants to preserve gendered words such as women or mother by ensuring sex means biological sex in the 2010 Equality Act. He said legislation, which ensures people with protected characteristics are not discriminated against, was conceived in the dog days of the last Labour government. Mr. Sunak added,
It has been a Trojan horse that has allowed every kind of woke nonsense to permeate public life. My government would review the Act to ensure we keep legitimate protections while stopping mission creep.
And it also shouldn't be controversial for parents to know what their children are being taught in school about relationships. Patients should know when hospitals are talking about men or women. And we shouldn't get bullied. And we shouldn't get bullied into believing that people can be any sex they want to be. They can't. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's just common sense. Because in our party, we value who you are, not what you are. We are not captured. We are not captured by identity politics. We just want the best person to do the job. And it's because we are not captured by identity politics that we can take on and stand up to this woke nonsense that wants to cancel our history, our values, and can't even say what a woman is.
Sunak is frequently parroting phrases from the mainstream media, such as woke nonsense, and generally carries the sentiment that trans people, trans women in particular, because he tends to ignore that trans men exist, are a threat to public safety. It is a shame that this man, more obsessed with public toilets than a heroin addict, holds the lives of 340,000 people in his hands, because government hostility and policy change affects real people in real ways. Hot off the heels of Sunak's woke nonsense speech was the sickening murder of Brianna Ghey, a young trans girl who was killed in a transphobically motivated attack. After the weeks it took for police to even acknowledge that this attack was a hate crime, Sunak had this to say in the House of Commons.
But it's a bit rich, Mr. Speaker, to hear about promises from someone who's broken every single promise he was elected on. I mean, I think I counted almost 30 in the last year. Pensions, planning, peerages, public sector pay, tuition fees, childcare, second referendums, defining a woman. Although in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn. The list goes on, but the theme is the same, Mr. Speaker. It's empty words, broken promises, and absolutely no plan.
Of all the weeks to say that, when Brianna's mother is in this chamber, shame, parading as a man of integrity when he's got absolutely no responsibility. Absolute. Of all.
Either side. I think the member's getting carried away. Can I just say that our constituents want to hear the questions and they certainly want to hear the answers. They don't want to hear organised barracking. So please, I want no more. Keir Starmer.
I think the role of the Prime Minister is to ensure that every single citizen in this country feels safe and respected. It's a shame the Prime Minister doesn't share that.
The UK has a government that cheers on transphobic remarks in front of a murdered girl's mother like a ring of schoolyard bullies, to the point where they have to be calmed by the Speaker like a teacher. These are not people fit to run a country. These are hateful children bickering over power. The defining a woman that Sunak refers to is referencing his issues with the 2010 Equality Act, which, under its original conception, would deem the Brianna murder as a hate crime. However, Sunak would have this altered. More recently, Sunak has introduced more and more anti-trans legislation, blocking Scotland's gender reform proposals, discontinuing care for those under 18, and failing to remedy the horrific wait times in the NHS. This reign of dead cats is to distract from the UK's spiralling inflation problem, unethical and ineffective immigration management, Brexit dumpster fire, and exploding poverty rates. Yet he would rather throw trans people under the bus to win himself another term in office. The UK is currently a hopeless place to be transgender. Politicians and the media constantly debate your existence, all the while stripping bare the little support you have.
Throughout all of this, Minecraft has remained my safe space, my refuge when I wanted to escape the real world. I'm not an expert in politics, nor am I a licensed psychiatrist, but the things I see happening in my country to people like me fills me with an indescribable dread. I used to consider myself politically neutral, but a phrase that echoes in my head often is, if you're not angry, then you're not paying attention. Modern politics is the bystander effect with international consequences. Whilst people die overseas in wars benefiting only the rich, domestic policy is dominated by scare tactics and demonisation of innocent groups, just as it always has been. But it is up to us to make sure it doesn't have to continue like this. Call out bigotry and dead cats wherever you see them. Protect trans youth. Don't let innocent lives be destroyed to distract you from your own destruction. If you're not angry, then you're not paying attention. I'm recording this a day before polling day in the UK, so depending on how quickly I edit it, it may be outdated information, or the Tories may be in for another couple years. We don't know yet. But if this comes out before polling day, vote. You have a right to vote, people have fought for you to vote, and that is the only power we have left against the rich and the powerful, who are doing this, destroying us just to distract us.
The reason I've linked together British politics, Minecraft, and my own personal life story is because they are all interconnected. This has been a very personal video to make, and my reasons for doing so were partly to educate, and partly to express a more personal side that I don't often show on this channel. I expect the comment section on this video to become a tense place, so stay safe down there. And remember, there is always a way forwards. If you're a trans person in the UK and you relate to anything that I've said, then please, remember life does get easier, it moves in unpredictable ways, and the future will be different from the present.
Life is incredibly unpredictable. This time last year, I sat my A-level exams. 6 months ago, I was a teacher. And 1 month ago, I worked in a pub. And now I'm unemployed, smoking in a field on a weekday. Yet currently, I'm the happiest I've ever been. I know who I am, and I'm confident enough to express it. Going out in a skirt is empowering. I don't let anyone ever stop you. Trans women are women, trans men are men, and no matter how you identify, honey, you still look gorgeous. And that is a hill I will gladly die on. And now before the rain gets too heavy, so I'm recording all of this in one day because I wanted to get it out before polling day, which is tomorrow, and somehow I've still got to record the non-camera voice lines. This is off script now, if you couldn't tell. I've still got to record the voice lines, and I've still got to edit it all. So either this video looks like shit and came out before polling day, or it's late and outdated. There is no in between. But the issue with UK politics is that it's basically all the same people just wearing different colours. And I'm sure that when the Tories are out tomorrow, whoever takes over may phrase things in a different way, but the gender recognition process, the hate crimes, the fight for validating our very existence, the media approach will stay the same. Mainstream media, although controlled by the government, stays the same people, no matter who's voted in. And I doubt anything will be done about that. Be true to who you are, love yourself, and look forward to more Minecraft videos. Follow my Twitch. You get to see more of me doing dumb things. Let me know if you want me to do more video essays and more unscripted ramblings at the end of my videos, because that's become a theme. I've done that in all of them. I've gone off script and had a little ramble. We ignore that my most viewed video is entirely unscripted. I just let the the editing software preview play and recorded over the top of that. So there was a lot of stuttering, and somehow that's my most viewed video. But it is also the oldest of my new stream of content. But yeah, now you know my life story. And I hope it resonated with some of you. I hope it inspired some of you to keep on going when times are hard. And maybe I've changed who you're going to vote for. But I doubt it. And also this will probably come out too late for that anyway, because I'm a serial procrastinator. But yeah, stay safe, have fun, watch my regular Minecraft content. Mwah. Oh, and thanks to my Patreons. I might have done a little Patreon scroll while I was talking, because there's a big empty space here that I could probably fill with a little credit sequence. So, knowing me, I probably would have done that if I had the time. But now I've got to go back inside, record voice lines, and edit it all together. I need more B-reel footage as well. So I might stream, get loads of B-reel footage, and just make loads of content. I'm probably going to be up all night, to be fair. I'll make myself another iced coffee when I go back inside. Lactose intolerance ain't got nothing on me. But yeah, stay safe, have fun. Until next time.